Introduction. Eye and the skies above Israel and the Gaza Strip, rockets crisscross the heavens like malevolent stars, each one carrying a payload of fear, destruction, and death. Below, on the sacred soil that has been fought over for millennia, people of different faiths and ethnicities live their lives in the shadow of these rockets, their destinies, shaped by political decisions and acts of violence often beyond their control. This is the setting for Divided Skies, Rockets, Religion, and the Israel-Hamas Conflict. A book that aims to delve deep into one of the most enduring and complex conflicts of our time. The Israel-Hamas conflict is not just a dispute over land. It is a tangle of historical grievances, religious fervor, and geopolitical interests. It is a struggle that has been shaped by the broader currents of history and politics, from the fall of the Ottoman Empire to the geopolitics of the Cold War, from the rise of Islamic fundamentalism to the shifting sands of global alliances. But at its core, it is a human story, one that has been written in the blood and tears of the people who have lived and died in this troubled land. This book is structured to provide a comprehensive understanding of the conflict, dissecting it from multiple angles: historical, religious, military, and personal. We begin by exploring the origins of the Israel-Hamas conflict, tracing it back to the birth of Israel and the rise of Palestinian nationalism. We examine the role that religion has played in shaping the identities and aspirations of the people involved, and how it has been used both to justify and to oppose acts of violence. As we move through the chapters, we will delve into the various military operations and strategies employed by both sides, from the Six-Day War to the latest airstrikes and rocket attacks. We will look at the impact of these actions on the people who live in Israel and Gaza, exploring the human cost of a conflict that often seems abstract and distant to those who observe it from afar. We will also consider the role of external actors, from the United States and European powers to regional players like Iran and Hezbollah. How have their interests and actions shaped the course of the conflict, and what might this mean for the future? Finally, we will look ahead, considering the prospects for peace and what it might take to break the cycle of violence. Is a two-state solution still viable, or have we moved past the point of no return? What role can international actors play in facilitating a resolution, and what obstacles stand in the way? As you turn the pages of this book, I invite you to look beyond the headlines and the sound bites, to think critically about the narratives that are often presented as facts, and to consider the human stories that are all too often overlooked. For it is only by understanding the complexities and nuances of this conflict that we can hope to find a path to peace and to heal the divided skies that hang over this troubled land. Chapter 1. The Genesis of Conflict and the Aftermath of World War II. The world was eager, to close a dark chapter in human history. Yet, even as the embers of conflict cooled in Europe and Asia, a new fire was kindling in the Middle East. The establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 was a moment of triumph for the Jewish people, who had long yearned for a homeland, especially after the horrors of the Holocaust. But for the Palestinians, who had been living in the region for generations, the birth of Israel marked the beginning of what they call the Nakba, or catastrophe. It was a seismic event that would set the stage for decades of conflict, including the rise of Hamas and the ongoing struggle between Israel and the Palestinians. The United Nations Partition Plan of 1947 aimed to divide British-controlled Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states, with Jerusalem under international administration. Jewish leaders accepted the plan, but Arab leaders did not, leading to a war that would result in the establishment of Israel and the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. As David Ben-Gurion declared the independence of Israel, armies from neighboring Arab states invaded, aiming to quash the nascent country. Despite being outnumbered, Israel not only survived, but also expanded its territory. When the armistice lines were drawn in 1949, Israel had gained control of much of the land originally designated for the Arab state in the UN partition plan. For the Palestinians, the war resulted in a mass exodus. Some fled from the fighting, while others were forcibly expelled from their homes. Villages were emptied, and the keys to their homes became symbols of a right to return, a dream passed down through generations, even as their former villages were either destroyed or repopulated by Israelis. The Palestinian exodus and the establishment of Israel are two sides of the same historical coin, forever linked yet viewed through vastly different lenses. For Israelis, the founding of their state is celebrated as a miraculous victory, a realization of the Zionist dream. For Palestinians, the same event is mourned as a tragic loss, the beginning of a long and painful period of displacement and occupation. This duality, this tale of one land viewed through two very different historical and emotional prisms, lays the groundwork for the complex and often violent relationship between Israel and Hamas, the Palestinian political and militant group that would rise several decades later. As we delve deeper into the origins and evolutions of this conflict, it becomes crucial to understand these foundational events. They not only shaped the physical landscape, but also etched deep emotional and psychological scars that continue to influence the actions and reactions of both sides to this day. The birth of Israel and the Palestinian exodus are not just events in a history book. They are the opening chapters in a narrative that has yet to find its conclusion. As rockets soar through divided skies and peace remains elusive, the echoes of 1948 continue to reverberate, a haunting reminder of a genesis that has begotten not just a homeland, but also a conflict with seemingly no end in sight. The rise of Hamas. As the years rolled on from the tumultuous events of 1948, the Palestinian territories became a complex tapestry of political ideologies and movements. Among them, a new player would emerge that would significantly alter the dynamics of the Israel-Palestine conflict, Hamas. Founded in 1987 during the First Intifada, a Palestinian uprising against Israeli occupation, Hamas was initially seen as an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. However, it quickly distinguished itself with its uncompromising stance against Israel and its commitment to an Islamic state in Palestine. The ideology of Hamas is deeply rooted in Islamic principles, and its charter explicitly calls for the liberation of Palestine through jihad or holy struggle, unlike the Palestine Liberation Organization (PLO) and its dominant faction Fatah, which over time became more amenable to negotiations with Israel. Hamas has consistently rejected the idea of a two-state solution. For Hamas, the struggle against Israel is not just political, but also religious, a battle for the very soul of an Islamic Palestine. In its early years, Hamas focused on social welfare activities, running schools, hospitals, and religious institutions in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. This endeared the organization to many Palestinians, who saw it as a less corrupt and more effective alternative to the Fatah-dominated Palestinian Authority. However, it didn't take long for Hamas to transition from social work to armed resistance. The group's military wing, the Izz ad-Din al-Qassam Brigades, was responsible for numerous attacks against Israeli military and civilian targets. Including suicide bombings that shocked the world and led to its designation as a terrorist organization by Israel, the United States, and the European Union. The rise of Hamas presented a new set of challenges for Israel. Unlike Fatah, which had recognized Israel and was engaged in peace talks, Hamas was an opponent that refused even to acknowledge the Israeli state's right to exist. This ideological rigidity made any form of negotiation or peace settlement exceedingly difficult, further complicating an already intricate geopolitical puzzle. For Palestinians, the emergence of Hamas offered a different path, one that rejected compromise and instead embraced resistance as both means and end. Yet this path also came at a cost, as it led to international isolation and recurrent conflicts with Israel, each leaving behind a trail of destruction and human suffering. As we trace the arc of the Israel-Hamas conflict, understanding the ideology and early actions of Hamas is crucial. It provides context for the group's current strategies and tactics and offers insights into the challenges and possibilities for peace in this deeply divided region. The rise of Hamas is not just another chapter in this long-running saga. It is a pivotal moment that redefined the conflict, introducing new actors and new ideologies into an already volatile mix. And as rockets continue to light up the divided skies, the role of Hamas remains central to any discussion about the future of Israel and Palestine. The First Intifada. The late 1980s were a time of global change, with the fall of the Berlin Wall and the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Yet, in the narrow alleys and crowded refugee camps of the West Bank and Gaza Strip, a different kind of revolution was taking shape. The First Intifada, which erupted in December 1987, was a grassroots uprising against Israeli occupation, and it would serve as the crucible in which Hamas was forged and gained prominence. The word intifada translates to shaking off, and the movement was precisely that, a collective attempt by Palestinians to shake off the yoke of Israeli military rule. Unlike later conflicts that would involve rockets and suicide bombings, the First Intifada was characterized by civil disobedience, general strikes, and protests. Palestinians threw stones and Molotov cocktails, while the Israeli military responded with tear gas, rubber bullets, and, often, live ammunition. The images of young Palestinians slinging stones at heavily armed Israeli soldiers became iconic, symbolizing the David versus Goliath nature of the struggle. The Intifada was not initially orchestrated by any single group or leader, but was a spontaneous, popular uprising. However, it didn't take long for political organizations to step in and try to steer the movement. Fatah, the dominant faction of the PLO, was quick to get involved, but it was Hamas, with its uncompromising stance against Israel and its growing grassroots support, that saw its fortunes rise dramatically during this period. The First Intifada was a turning point for Hamas in several ways. First, it provided the group with a platform to propagate its ideology, which resonated with many Palestinians frustrated by years of occupation and failed peace talks. Second, the Intifada allowed Hamas to demonstrate its commitment to resistance, setting it apart from other Palestinian factions more willing to negotiate with Israel. Finally, the harsh Israeli response to the uprising, which resulted in significant Palestinian casualties, further radicalized the population and drove many into the arms of Hamas. For Israel, the First Intifada was a wake-up call, revealing the depth of Palestinian resentment and the limitations of military force in quelling it. The uprising did not lead to immediate concessions from Israel, but it set the stage for future negotiations, including the Oslo Accords, even as it also paved the way for more radical forms of resistance, including the rise of Hamas. As we navigate through the labyrinthine complexities of the Israel-Hamas conflict, the First Intifada serves as a pivotal milestone. It was a prelude to the long and often bloody struggle that would follow, a struggle that has seen periods of intense violence punctuated by fleeting moments of hope. The uprising was both a manifestation of long-standing grievances and a catalyst for future conflicts, a chapter in the story that, while not the beginning, was certainly a significant turning point. And as we look to the divided skies for signs of what the future may hold, the echoes of the First Intifada remind us that the roots of this conflict run deep, tangled in the soil of history, ideology, and a relentless quest for identity and dignity. Chapter 2. The Role of Religion. In the annals of human history, few places have been as deeply intertwined with religion as the land that. For Jews, this land is Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, promised to them by God in the Hebrew Bible. The concept of a promised land is deeply embedded in Jewish religious thought, and it has been a driving force behind the Zionist movement, which sought to establish a Jewish homeland in Palestine. Zionism, as a political and cultural movement, was born in the late 19th century, but its roots can be traced back to ancient Jewish traditions and texts. The yearning for a return to Zion, another name for Jerusalem, and by extension, the entire Holy Land, has been a constant theme in Jewish prayer and ritual for centuries. This yearning was intensified by historical events such as the expulsion of Jews from Spain in 1492 and the pogroms in Eastern Europe. culminating in the unimaginable horrors of the Holocaust. For many Jews, the establishment of a Jewish state was not just a political necessity, but also a religious imperative, a fulfillment of divine promise. The Zionist movement, spearheaded by figures like Theodor Herzl, was initially more secular than religious, focused on the need for a safe haven for Jews amidst rising anti-Semitism in Europe. However, the idea of a Jewish homeland in Palestine found resonance among religious Jews as well, who saw it as the realization of biblical prophecies. Over time, religious Zionism became a significant force, advocating for the settlement of all biblical lands and often opposing any form of territorial compromise. For religious Zionists, the Six-Day War of 1967 was a miraculous event, a divine intervention that led to the capture of East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and other territories. The war gave a tremendous boost to the settler movement, which saw the occupation of these lands as a sacred duty. This religious conviction has made the settler movement one of the most uncompromising elements in Israeli politics, further complicating efforts to reach a peaceful resolution to the conflict with the Palestinians. The intertwining of Judaism and Zionism in the context of the Israel-Hamas conflict cannot be overstated. It shapes Israeli policies, influences public opinion, and affects the dynamics of peace negotiations. While not all Israelis are religious, and many are critical of the settler movement, the impact of religious beliefs on the conflict is profound. It provides a layer of complexity that goes beyond mere politics, adding a dimension of sacredness to the land that both sides claim as their own. As we continue to explore the multifaceted Israel-Hamas conflict, understanding the role of Judaism and Zionism in shaping the Israeli perspective is crucial. It offers a window into the soul of a nation, revealing the deeply held beliefs that influence its actions and decisions. And as rockets rain, down and peace talks falter, the notion of a promised land serves as both inspiration and obstacle, a heavenly ideal that casts a long shadow over the earthly realities of war and diplomacy. Islam and Palestinian nationalism, the quest for home. Just as Judaism and Zionism are inextricably linked in the Israeli narrative, so too are Islam and Palestinian nationalism intertwined in the Palestinian quest for statehood. For Palestinians, the land is not just a piece of territory to be negotiated. It is Waqf, sacred Islamic trust, especially the city of Jerusalem, which houses the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third holiest site in Islam. The mosque's significance is monumental, believed to be the location from which the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven during his night journey. This religious sanctity amplifies the political and nationalistic fervor, making the conflict not just a struggle for land, but a battle for the preservation of Islamic heritage. Palestinian nationalism, as a political ideology, gained momentum in the 20th century, particularly after the Nakba in 1948. However, its roots are deeply embedded in Islamic history and identity. The Palestinian cause is often framed within the broader context of the Ummah, the global Islamic community, and it garners widespread support from Muslim-majority countries. This has been especially true for Hamas, which emerged as an Islamic resistance movement with the explicit goal of liberating Palestine through jihad. The Islamic underpinnings of Palestinian nationalism have evolved over time, influenced by various geopolitical factors. Initially, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, under Yasser Arafat, had a more secular and nationalist focus. However, the perceived failure of secular movements to achieve meaningful progress toward Palestinian statehood led to a rise in Islamic activism, culminating in the ascendancy of Hamas. For many Palestinians, especially those living under the hardships of occupation and blockade, the uncompromising stance of Hamas resonates more than the diplomatic overtures of their secular counterparts. The role of Islam in Palestinian nationalism also has implications for the peace process. Just as religious Zionists in Israel are often the most opposed to territorial compromise, So too are Islamic factions within the Palestinian territories less likely to accept a two-state solution that they see as a betrayal of sacred Islamic land. This makes negotiations exceedingly difficult, as religious imperatives often override political pragmatism. As we navigate the intricate maze of the Israel-Hamas conflict, understanding the role of Islam and Palestinian nationalism is essential. It provides a lens through which to view the actions and motivations of key players, offering a deeper understanding of why certain paths to peace are so fraught with obstacles. The quest for home, for Palestinians, is not just a nationalistic endeavor but a religious duty, a divine mandate that informs their resistance and shapes their aspirations. In the divided skies over Israel and Palestine, where rockets and prayers are both launched in fervent arcs, the role of religion looms large. It is a force that both unites and divides, that offers hope for eternal peace even as it fuels the fires of earthly conflict. And as we delve further into the complexities of this enduring struggle, the influence of Islam and Palestinian nationalism will remain a constant theme, a foundational element of a conflict with roots that reach deep into the sacred soil of history and belief. The holy sites, Jerusalem as a flashpoint. In the heart of this land of divided skies and conflicting narratives lies Jerusalem, a city that holds within its ancient walls the dreams and prayers of three major world religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. For Jews, the Western Wall is the last remnant of the Second Temple, a place to mourn its destruction and yearn for its rebuilding. For Christians, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre marks the site of Jesus Christ's crucifixion and resurrection. For Muslims, the Al-Aqsa Mosque stands as a testament to the Prophet Muhammad's night journey to heaven. Each stone, each narrow alley, resonates with millennia of religious significance, making Jerusalem not just a city, but a symbol, a microcosm of the larger Israel-Hamas conflict. The status of Jerusalem has always been one of the most contentious issues in any peace negotiation. Israel claims it as its undivided capital, a stance solidified by the annexation of East Jerusalem after the Six-Day War in 1967. Palestinians, on the other hand, see East Jerusalem as the capital of their future state. This city is not just a political chess piece, it is a religious epicenter, a place where divine and earthly struggles intersect. The importance of Jerusalem as a religious site makes it a flashpoint in the Israel-Hamas conflict. Any perceived threat to the holy sites can trigger widespread unrest, not just in Israel and the Palestinian territories, but across the Muslim world. This was evident in the Second Intifada, which was sparked by Ariel Sharon's visit to the Temple Mount, known to Muslims as the Haram al-Sharif. Similarly, Hamas has often cited the defense of Al-Aqsa as a rallying cry, using it to galvanize support for its military actions against Israel. The religious sensitivity surrounding Jerusalem complicates any efforts to find a peaceful resolution to the Israel-Hamas conflict. Proposals to place the holy sites under international administration have been met with skepticism, if not outright hostility, from both sides. For religious Zionists, relinquishing control over any part of Jerusalem is tantamount to betraying God's promise. For devout Muslims, the idea of ceding authority over Islamic holy sites to non-Muslim entities is equally unacceptable. As we continue to explore the multifaceted layers of the Israel-Hamas conflict, the role of Jerusalem and its holy site serves as a constant reminder of the stakes involved. This is not just a battle for land or political sovereignty. It is a struggle for the soul of a city that sits at the crossroads of faith and history. The rockets may fall and the peace talks may falter, but the significance of Jerusalem endures, a sacred enigma at the heart of a profane conflict. In this city of stone and prayer, where the past is always present, and the sky is divided by more than just rockets and borders, the holy sites stand as both a symbol of unity and a source of division. They encapsulate the religious dimensions of a conflict that defies easy solutions, serving as a poignant reminder that any path to peace must navigate not just the realities of today, but also the sacred legacies of millennia. Chapter 3. The political landscape eye and the bustling halls of the Knesset, Israel's parliament, one can witness the full gamut of political ideologies that make up the Israeli landscape. From the hawkish right to the dovish left, from religious parties to secular ones, the diversity of views is both a testament to Israel's vibrant democracy and a reflection of the complexities that characterize the Israel-Hamas conflict. Understanding this political spectrum is crucial for grasping the nuances of Israeli policy toward Hamas and the Palestinians, as well as the internal debates that shape these policies. At one end of the spectrum are the right-wing parties, often aligned with religious Zionism, which advocate for a strong military stance against Hamas and are generally opposed to territorial concessions. These parties, such as Likud and Yamina, see the entire land of Israel, including the West Bank, as an indivisible entity that should remain under Israeli control. Their influence has been particularly noticeable in the expansion of settlements and the reluctance to engage in peace talks that involve significant territorial compromises. In the center of the political spectrum, parties like Yesh Atid and Blue and White take a more pragmatic approach. While they too prioritize Israel's security, they are generally more open to negotiations and a two-state solution, albeit with conditions that often include the demilitarization of a future Palestinian state and the retention of key Israeli settlements. Their stance reflects a broader public sentiment that is weary of conflict but skeptical of the prospects for lasting peace with Hamas. On the left, parties such as Labor and Meretz advocate for a more conciliatory approach toward the Palestinians, including the cessation of settlement activities and the lifting of the blockade on Gaza. They are often critical of Israel's military actions, arguing that a peaceful resolution is not only morally imperative, but also in Israel's long-term interest. However, the left has been weakened in recent years, struggling to gain traction in a political climate that has shifted toward security concerns, especially in the wake of repeated conflicts with Hamas. Adding another layer of complexity are the ultra-Orthodox parties like Shas and United Torah Judaism, whose primary concerns are religious in nature, such as Sabbath observance and religious education. While not directly focused on the Israel-Hamas conflict, their role in coalition politics often gives them a say in matters of war and peace. As we delve deeper into the Israel-Hamas conflict, the kaleidoscope of Israeli politics provides essential context. It helps explain why certain policies are adopted, why some peace initiatives fail, and why others never get off the ground. The political landscape in Israel is not just a backdrop to the conflict. It is an active participant, shaping and being shaped by the ongoing struggle. In this ever-shifting political arena, where alliances are formed and broken with each election cycle, the path to a lasting resolution with Hamas remains elusive. Yet it is within this spectrum of views that any hope for peace must be found, negotiated through the intricate dance of democracy and diplomacy. As rockets continue to disrupt the divided skies, the political landscape below remains a battleground of ideologies, each vying for the soul of a nation caught between the imperatives of security and the yearnings for peace. Palestinian politics. Fatah against Hamas. In the political landscape of the Palestinian territories, two major factions stand out, Fatah and Hamas. While both aim for the establishment of a Palestinian state, their methods, ideologies, and governing styles are often at odds, adding another layer of complexity to the Israel-Hamas conflict. Understanding the dynamics between these two groups is essential for grasping the intricacies of Palestinian politics and how they impact the ongoing struggle with Israel. Fatah, founded by Yasser Arafat in the late 1950s, has long been the dominant force in Palestinian politics. Initially committed to armed struggle against Israel, Fatah gradually moved toward diplomacy, culminating in the Oslo Accords of the 1990s. These peace agreements with Israel led to the establishment of the Palestinian Authority, which Fatah has largely controlled. The faction's willingness to negotiate with Israel has garnered it international legitimacy, but has also led to criticisms of ineffectiveness and corruption, particularly among Palestinians who feel that the peace process has yielded few tangible benefits. Enter Hamas, the Islamic resistance movement. Founded in 1987 during the First Intifada, Hamas offered an alternative to Fatah's diplomatic approach. Rooted in Islamic principles, the group gained popularity through its social welfare programs and its commitment to armed resistance against Israel. Unlike Fatah, Hamas does not recognize Israel's right to exist and has been designated as a terrorist organization by several countries. Its rise to prominence came in 2006 when it won the Palestinian legislative elections, leading to a brief but intense civil conflict with Fatah that resulted in Hamas taking control of the Gaza Strip. The division between Fatah-controlled West Bank and Hamas-controlled Gaza has had profound implications for the Palestinian cause. On one hand, it has weakened the Palestinians' bargaining position in peace negotiations with Israel. On the other, it has led to different strategies and tactics being employed in the struggle against Israeli occupation. While Fatah has continued to engage in diplomatic efforts, albeit with limited success, Hamas has resorted to rocket attacks and other forms of armed resistance, leading to recurrent conflicts with Israel. This internal Palestinian divide is not just a political rivalry, it's a fundamental disagreement over how to achieve the shared goal of Palestinian statehood. Fatah tends to be more secular and is willing to work within the international system, whereas Hamas adopts a more Islamic and militant stance, often aligning itself with countries and groups that are in open conflict with Israel and the West. As we continue to dissect the Israel-Hamas conflict, the role of Palestinian politics, particularly the rivalry between Fatah and Hamas, serves as a crucial piece of the puzzle. It influences everything from peace talks to military strategies, shaping the options available to Palestinian leaders and affecting the daily lives of ordinary Palestinians. In a land where the political is deeply personal, understanding the dynamics between Fatah and Hamas is key to comprehending the larger conflict that continues to unfold under the divided skies of Israel and Palestine. The international community, allies and adversaries. In the complex tapestry of the Israel-Hamas conflict, the threads of international involvement are woven deeply into its fabric. The role of the international community is not merely that of a spectator, it is an active participant, influencing the course of events through diplomatic efforts, military aid, and economic sanctions. Understanding the alliances and adversaries in this global context is crucial for grasping the broader implications of the Israel-Hamas struggle and the challenges and opportunities it presents on the world stage. Israel enjoys a special relationship with the United States, its most steadfast ally. This alliance is fortified by shared democratic values, strategic interests, and a strong pro-Israel lobby within the U.S. The American-Israeli partnership manifests in various forms, from military aid to diplomatic support in international forums. However, this alliance is not without its complexities, as differing views on settlement expansion and peace negotiations occasionally strain relations. On the other side, Hamas finds its most reliable allies among countries like Iran and organizations such as Hezbollah. The support is often material, including financial aid and military supplies, but it is also ideological, rooted in a shared opposition to Israeli occupation and a commitment to the Palestinian cause. However, this alliance places Hamas in a challenging position, as it aligns the group with entities that are often at odds with Western powers, further complicating peace efforts. The European Union and other Western countries occupy a more nuanced position. While generally supportive of Israel's right to exist and defend itself, they are also critical of Israeli policies concerning settlements and the treatment of Palestinians. Their stance toward Hamas is generally unfavorable, primarily due to the group's refusal to renounce violence and recognize Israel. But they are often more willing than the U.S. to engage with a broader range of Palestinian representatives. The Arab states, traditionally supporters of the Palestinian cause, have shown a shifting landscape of alliances in recent years. Countries like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have moved closer to a tacit alliance with Israel, driven by mutual concerns over Iran's regional ambitions. This realignment has led to a more complex web of relationships that adds another layer of intricacy to the Israel-Hamas conflict. As we continue to navigate the labyrinthine corridors of this enduring struggle, the role of the international community serves as both a mirror and a lens. It reflects the global significance of the Israel-Hamas conflict and magnifies its complexities, revealing a network of alliances and enmities that extend far beyond the borders of Israel and the Palestinian territories. In this global arena, where diplomatic chess is played on board that spans continents, understanding the moves and countermoves of international actors is key to comprehending the larger game at play. And as rockets soar and peace talks falter, the international community remains a pivotal force, capable of tipping the scales in a conflict that reverberates across the world. Chapter 4. The Six-Day War and its Aftermath. In the early months of 1967, tensions in the Middle East reached a boiling point. A series of events, including the withdrawal of the United Nations Emergency Force from the Sinai Peninsula and Egypt's closure of the Straits of Tiran to Israeli ships, set the stage for a conflict that would reshape the region. Israel, feeling encircled and threatened, made the fateful decision to launch a preemptive strike against Egypt on June 5, 1967. This action ignited what would come to be known as the Six-Day War, a conflict that involved not just Israel and Egypt, but also Jordan and Syria. The war was swift but transformative. Within 6 days, Israel had captured the Sinai Peninsula, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. The territorial gains were staggering, but so were the political and social ramifications. The war significantly altered the geopolitics of the Middle East, giving Israel a new set of security concerns and a host of international criticisms. It also had a profound impact on the Palestinian population, as Israel's new territorial acquisitions included areas densely populated by Palestinians. The aftermath of the Six-Day War set the stage for the ongoing conflict between Israel and its neighbors, including the Palestinian territories. The war led to a surge in Palestinian nationalism, providing a fertile ground for the ideologies and actions of groups like Fatah and later Hamas. It also led to the rise of the settler movement in Israel, particularly among religious Zionists who saw the victory as a divine sign, encouraging the establishment of Jewish settlements in the newly captured territories. The Six-Day War and its aftermath are not just historical events. They are critical chapters in the narrative of the Israel-Hamas conflict. The war shaped the strategies, hardened the positions, and defined the challenges that would confront both sides in the years to come. It was a turning point that solidified Israel's military prowess, but also deepened its entanglement in a complex, protracted conflict that defies easy solutions. As we delve further into the intricacies of this struggle, the echoes of the Six-Day War serve as a constant reminder of how quickly the sands can shift, altering the landscape in ways that are felt for generations. 6 days that shook the Middle East. The early months of 1967 were fraught with tension, as geopolitical shifts and military posturing set the stage for a conflict that would reverberate across the Middle East and beyond. When Israel launched a preemptive strike against Egypt on June 5, 1967, it ignited a war that would last just 6 days, but leave an indelible impact on the region. The swift conflict saw Israel capturing the Sinai Peninsula, Gaza Strip, West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. These territorial gains were as staggering as they were transformative, reshaping the geopolitical landscape and setting the stage for decades of conflict and negotiation. The aftermath of the war was a complex tapestry of political, social, and religious ramifications. Israel found itself in possession of territories densely populated by Palestinians, fueling a surge in Palestinian nationalism and laying the groundwork for the rise of groups like Fatah and later Hamas. The war also gave birth to Israel's settler movement, particularly among religious Zionists who saw the victory as a divine mandate to establish Jewish settlements in the captured territories. The Six-Day War was more than a pivotal military conflict. It was a seismic event that shook the foundations of the Middle East. It solidified Israel's reputation as a formidable military power, but also ensnared it in a web of geopolitical complexities that continue to this day. The war defined the challenges, shaped the strategies, and hardened the positions of all parties involved, casting a long shadow over subsequent peace efforts and military engagements. As we navigate the labyrinthine complexities of the Israel-Hamas conflict, the reverberations of those 6 days serve as a poignant reminder of how quickly fortunes can change, leaving a legacy that generations must grapple with. The occupation, new territories, new problems. The capture of new territories in the Six-Day War presented Israel with a set of challenges that were as complex as they were immediate. Suddenly, Israel found itself in control of areas densely populated by Palestinians, including the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem. This occupation introduced a host of new problems, ranging from security concerns to ethical dilemmas, all set against a backdrop of international scrutiny. One of the most immediate challenges was the question of governance over the newly acquired territories. Israel found itself in a precarious position, balancing its own security needs with the rights and aspirations of the Palestinian population. Military administration was quickly established, but this did little to quell the growing sense of disenfranchisement among Palestinians. The occupation fueled resentment and laid the groundwork for future uprisings, most notably the First and Second Intifadas, which would erupt in the coming decades. The occupation also gave rise to the Israeli settler movement, particularly among religious Zionists who saw the capture of biblical lands like Judea and Samaria as a fulfillment of divine prophecy. Settlements began to sprout up, often with government support, complicating any future attempts at territorial compromise. These settlements became a point of contention not just between Israel and the Palestinians, but also between Israel and the international community, which largely views them as illegal under international law. The newly occupied territories also became a breeding ground for Palestinian political movements. Fatah, which had been founded years earlier, gained new relevance and support, while the conditions of occupation contributed to the eventual rise of Hamas. The political landscape within these territories became a complex interplay of various factions, each vying for control and influence, further complicating Israel's governance and security operations. The occupation introduced a moral dimension to the conflict that continues to be a subject of intense debate. Questions about the ethics of occupation, the use of military force against civilian populations, and the legality of settlement expansion have polarized opinions both within Israel and around the world. These ethical dilemmas have been the subject of numerous international resolutions and have played a significant role in shaping global public opinion regarding the Israel-Hamas conflict. As we delve deeper into the intricacies of this enduring struggle, the occupation stands as a pivotal chapter. It is a period that has defined the parameters of the conflict, setting the stage for the complex political, military, and ethical challenges that both sides face today. The occupation is not just a historical event, it is an ongoing reality that continues to shape the lives, choices, and aspirations of those who live under its shadow. Chapter 5. The Rise of Hamas. In the wake of the First Intifada, a new player emerged on the Palestinian political scene that would significantly alter the dynamics of the Israel-Hamas conflict. Founded in 1987, Hamas, or the Islamic resistance movement, offered an alternative to the more secular, nationalist approach of Fatah. Its ideological framework was rooted in Islamic principles, drawing inspiration from the Muslim Brotherhood and other Islamist movements. While Fatah had moved toward diplomacy and negotiations, particularly after the Oslo Accords, Hamas adopted a more militant stance, refusing to recognize Israel's right to exist and advocating for armed resistance as the path to Palestinian liberation. Hamas quickly gained popularity among Palestinians, not just for its uncompromising stance against Israel but also for its social welfare programs. In a landscape marred by poverty and unemployment, the group's charitable activities garnered it significant grassroots support. This dual approach of social welfare and armed resistance made Hamas a formidable force, both politically and militarily. The ideological framework of Hamas is articulated in its charter, which calls for the liberation of Palestine through jihad, or holy struggle. This document outlines not just the group's opposition to Israel, but also its vision for a future Palestinian state governed by Islamic law. It is a vision that resonates with a significant portion of the Palestinian population, particularly those who feel that diplomatic efforts have failed to bring about meaningful change. Hamas's rise to prominence was solidified in the 2006 Palestinian legislative elections, where it won a surprising victory over Fatah. This electoral win led to a brief but intense conflict between the two factions, culminating in Hamas taking control of the Gaza Strip. The group's ascendancy marked a turning point in the Israel-Hamas conflict, setting the stage for a series of military confrontations and significantly complicating peace efforts. As we continue to explore the complexities of the Israel-Hamas conflict, the rise of Hamas serves as a critical juncture. It represents a shift in Palestinian politics, a move toward a more Islamic and militant approach that has had profound implications for the conflict. Understanding the founding and ideological framework of Hamas is essential for grasping the motivations, strategies, and challenges that define this ongoing struggle. It offers insight into why certain ACE initiatives have failed and why others have never been attempted, providing a lens through which to view the actions and reactions that fuel this enduring conflict. The first suicide bombings. The tactic of suicide bombings entered the Israel-Hamas conflict in a way that would fundamentally alter its course and escalate its brutality. While suicide bombings were not a new phenomenon in the realm of global terrorism, their adoption by Hamas in the early 1990s marked a significant escalation in the group's methods of armed resistance. The bombings targeted Israeli civilians in buses, cafes, and other public spaces, causing not only immediate loss of life, but also instilling a pervasive sense of insecurity and fear across Israeli society. The first suicide bombings were a shock to the Israeli public and the international community alike. They were also a divisive issue among Palestinians. While some saw them as a desperate but necessary act of resistance against an overpowering military force, others questioned the morality and effectiveness of a tactic that targeted civilians and drew international condemnation. Regardless of one's stance on the issue, there was no denying the impact these bombings had on the conflict. They led to a hardening of Israeli public opinion, making concessions or negotiations even more challenging. Israel responded to the bombings with increased security measures, including checkpoints, targeted assassinations of Hamas leaders, and eventually the construction of a separation barrier. These measures were aimed at preventing terrorists from entering Israel, but also had the effect of increasing hardship for ordinary Palestinians, further entrenching animosity and distrust between the two sides. The tactic also had international repercussions. The bombings drew widespread condemnation, leading several countries to designate Hamas as a terrorist organization. This label has had a lasting impact on the group's international relations, limiting its ability to engage with certain states and international bodies. It also complicated efforts to reconcile with Fatah and form a unified Palestinian front, as the tactic was a point of contention between the two groups. As we delve further into the complexities of the Israel-Hamas conflict, the introduction of suicide bombings serves as a grim milestone. It represents a form of warfare that is both deeply personal and broadly impactful, affecting individual lives and geopolitical strategies alike. Understanding this tactic and its implications is crucial for comprehending the depth of the challenges that face any attempt to resolve this conflict. It's a chilling testament to the lengths to which parties will go when diplomatic avenues are either closed off or perceived as ineffective. And it underscores the urgent need for a resolution that addresses the root causes of this enduring struggle. The election of 2006. A turning point. The 2006 Palestinian legislative elections marked a watershed moment in the Israel-Hamas conflict. Against all expectations, Hamas emerged victorious, dealing a significant blow to the long-dominant Fatah party. The election results were a clear indication of the shifting political landscape within the Palestinian territories, reflecting widespread dissatisfaction with Fatah's governance and a growing support for Hamas's more militant approach to the conflict with Israel. Hamas's electoral victory had immediate and far-reaching consequences. For one, it led to a brief but intense period of civil conflict between Hamas and Fatah, culminating in Hamas taking control of the Gaza Strip. This internal division weakened the Palestinian political front, making it even more difficult to engage in meaningful peace negotiations with Israel. The division of governance between the West Bank, controlled by Fatah, and the Gaza Strip, controlled by Hamas, created a fragmented political landscape that persists to this day. Israel, along with much of the international community, was alarmed by Hamas's electoral success. Given the group's refusal to recognize Israel's right to exist and its commitment to armed resistance, the election results were seen as a setback for the peace process. Israel, along with other countries like the United States and members of the European Union, imposed economic sanctions on the Hamas-led Palestinian Authority, further exacerbating the hardships faced by ordinary Palestinians. The election also had implications for the tactics and strategies employed in the conflict. With Hamas in control of Gaza, the frequency and intensity of rocket attacks on Israeli towns increased, leading to a series of military confrontations between Israel and Hamas. These confrontations, in turn, led to international efforts to broker ceasefires and peace deals, although these have largely been short-lived. As we navigate the intricate maze of the Israel-Hamas conflict, the 2006 election stands as a pivotal moment that reshaped the contours of the struggle. It signaled a shift in Palestinian politics toward a more militant and uncompromising stance, complicating efforts to find a peaceful resolution. The election also exposed the deep divisions within Palestinian society, revealing a fragmented political landscape that challenges the very notion of a unified Palestinian state. Understanding the implications of this turning point is crucial for any meaningful analysis of the conflict, offering insights into the motivations, frustrations, and aspirations that fuel this ongoing saga. Chapter 6. Operation Cast Lead. In the years following the 2006 election, tensions between Israel and Hamas escalated, marked by sporadic rocket attacks from Gaza and retaliatory strikes by Israel. The situation reached a boiling point in late 2008, setting the stage for a military confrontation that would come to be known as Operation Cast Lead. The build-up to the operation was fraught with provocations and failed ceasefires. Rocket attacks from Gaza intensified, targeting southern Israeli towns and causing civilian casualties. Israel, in turn, tightened its blockade on the Gaza Strip, exacerbating an already dire humanitarian situation. Diplomatic efforts to de-escalate the conflict proved ineffective, as both sides seemed to be gearing up for a more significant military engagement. Israel's stated objective for the operation was to stop the rocket attacks and weaken Hamas's military capabilities. However, the operation was met with international scrutiny from the outset. Concerns were raised about the proportionality of Israel's response and the potential for civilian casualties in the densely populated Gaza Strip. These concerns would become even more pronounced as the operation unfolded. The build-up to Operation Cast Lead was not just a series of tactical maneuvers, it was a period of escalating rhetoric and hardening public opinion. In Israel, the constant rocket attacks fueled a sense of urgency and a demand for decisive action. In Gaza, the tightening blockade and the failure of diplomatic efforts led to a growing sense of desperation and a rallying around Hamas, despite the hardships the group's actions had brought upon the population. As we delve deeper into the Israel-Hamas conflict, understanding the factors that led to Operation Cast Lead is crucial. The operation itself would have far-reaching consequences, affecting not just the military balance between Israel and Hamas, but also the broader geopolitical landscape, including international perceptions of the conflict. The build-up to the operation serves as a case study in how cycles of violence escalate, how opportunities for de-escalation are missed or ignored, and how once the machinery of war is set in motion, it becomes exceedingly difficult to halt its advance. It's a sobering reminder of the complexities involved in this conflict and the high stakes that accompany each round of hostilities. The 22-day offensive. On December 27, 2008, Israel launched a massive air campaign against targets in the Gaza Strip, marking the beginning of a 22-day offensive that would come to be known as Operation Cast Lead. The initial airstrikes were followed by a ground invasion, with Israeli troops entering Gaza to engage Hamas militants directly. The scale and intensity of the operation were unprecedented, involving thousands of troops, tanks, and aircraft. Israel's stated objectives were to halt the rocket attacks on its southern cities and to significantly degrade Hamas's military capabilities. The 22-day offensive had a devastating impact. Hundreds of Palestinians were killed and thousands were injured, many of them civilians. Infrastructure in the Gaza Strip, already fragile due to the blockade, was severely damaged. Schools, hospitals, and UN facilities were not spared, leading to international outcry and accusations of war crimes. Israel also suffered casualties, both military and civilian, due to rocket attacks and combat operations. The operation was met with widespread international condemnation. Human rights organizations and several countries criticized Israel for the high civilian death toll and the destruction of non-military infrastructure. Protests erupted around the world, and diplomatic relations between Israel and some of its allies were strained. However, there were also those who defended Israel's actions as a legitimate response to ongoing rocket attacks from Gaza, arguing that the Israeli military had taken measures to minimize civilian casualties. Within the Palestinian territories, the operation led to a temporary halt in rocket attacks, but at a tremendous human cost. It also deepened the division between Fatah and Hamas, as the Palestinian Authority was criticized for its perceived lack of support for the people of Gaza during the conflict. For Hamas, the operation was a double-edged sword. While it survived the Israeli offensive and claimed it as a form of victory, the devastation wrought on Gaza and the loss of life weakened its standing among some segments of the Palestinian population. As we continue to explore the complexities of the Israel-Hamas conflict, the 22-day offensive serves as a grim testament to the devastating human and political costs of military engagement. It highlights the limitations of using military force to achieve lasting peace and raises ethical and legal questions that continue to be debated. The operation did not resolve the underlying issues of the conflict. Rather, it exacerbated them, sowing the seeds for future rounds of violence and deepening the mistrust between both sides. It stands as a stark reminder of the urgent need for a political solution to a conflict that has claimed too many lives and left an indelible scar on the conscience of the world. The aftermath: a fractured Gaza. The cessation of hostilities left Gaza in a state of profound disarray. Buildings lay in ruins, infrastructure was decimated, and the humanitarian situation reached crisis levels. The blockade, still enforced by Israel, severely hampered reconstruction efforts, leading to a dire shortage of essential supplies. This situation gave rise to an underground economy of smuggling tunnels, which, while alleviating some immediate needs, further destabilized the region and complicated international aid efforts. The Palestinian population found itself at a crossroads. On one hand, the devastation led to questions about the effectiveness and cost of Hamas's militant strategies. On the other hand, the shared suffering also fostered a sense of unity and defiance against what was widely seen as disproportionate military action by Israel. This complex interplay of disillusionment and solidarity made it difficult to predict the political winds in Gaza, as both sentiments existed side by side, often within the same households. The rift between Hamas and Fatah widened in the wake of the conflict. The Palestinian Authority, led by Fatah, was criticized for its perceived passivity during the operation, which some saw as tacit complicity with Israel. Hamas, despite the enormous human and material losses, claimed a sort of Pyrrhic victory simply by surviving the Israeli offensive. This claim resonated with a significant portion of the Palestinian population, enough to keep Hamas politically viable despite the devastation. Internationally, the operation had a lasting impact on Israel's diplomatic relations. Accusations of war crimes were levied by multiple international bodies, leading to calls for investigations and accountability. While these calls did not lead to immediate action, they contributed to a shifting perception of the conflict, influencing public opinion and diplomatic stances worldwide. The enduring legacy of the 22-day offensive is a Gaza Strip that remains fractured in almost every conceivable way, physically, politically, and socially. The operation did not resolve the root causes of the conflict. Rather, it intensified them, leaving behind a landscape of heightened tensions and reduced possibilities for reconciliation. The scars of those 22 days are etched into the collective memory of Gaza's inhabitants, serving as both a grim reminder of the cost of war and a rallying cry for those who insist that their cause, however fraught with peril, remains just. Chapter 7. The Gaza blockade. The Gaza Strip, already economically fragile before the onset of hostilities, found itself in an even more precarious situation following Operation Cast Lead. The blockade imposed by Israel, ostensibly for security reasons, had a crippling effect on Gaza's economy. The restrictions on the movement of goods and people not only hampered reconstruction efforts, but also stifled economic activity, leading to widespread unemployment, poverty, and dependence on international aid. The blockade turned Gaza into an isolated enclave, where basic necessities like food, medicine, and fuel were in short supply. The economic isolation had ripple effects that extended beyond material hardship. It led to the emergence of a black market economy, fueled by goods smuggled through tunnels from Egypt. While this underground economy provided a lifeline of sorts, it also had several negative consequences. It empowered criminal networks and extremist groups, undermined formal economic structures, and led to a loss of revenue for the governing authorities, further weakening the already fragile political institutions in Gaza. The blockade also had a psychological impact on the population. The sense of being cut off from the world, confined to a small geographic area with limited resources, contributed to a feeling of collective despair. This psychological toll should not be underestimated, as it influenced political attitudes, making the population more susceptible to extremist viewpoints and less optimistic about the prospects for peace and reconciliation. Internationally, the blockade became a focal point for criticism of Israel's policies toward Gaza. Human rights organizations in several countries argued that the blockade constituted a form of collective punishment, illegal under international law. Protests and flotillas aimed at breaking the blockade garnered media attention, although they did little to change the situation on the ground. Israel maintained that the blockade was necessary for its security, pointing to instances where materials imported into Gaza were used for building rockets and tunnels. However, this argument did little to sway international opinion, which increasingly viewed the blockade as a humanitarian issue. As we continue to dissect the complexities of the Israel-Hamas conflict, the economic isolation of Gaza stands as a critical element that shapes the day-to-day lives of its residents and influences the broader political landscape. The blockade is not merely an economic issue. It's a multifaceted strategy with profound implications for the conflict. It affects not just the flow of goods, but also the flow of ideas, the prospects for peace, and the very fabric of Gazan society. Understanding the economics of this isolation provides a window into the intractable challenges and human costs that characterize this ongoing struggle. The humanitarian crisis. The blockade's impact on Gaza extended far beyond economic hardship, giving rise to a humanitarian crisis that touched nearly every aspect of daily life. Basic services like healthcare, education, and sanitation deteriorated rapidly. Hospitals faced severe shortages of medicines and equipment, leading to inadequate medical care that put lives at risk. Educational institutions, already strained, struggled to provide quality education in an environment of scarcity. The lack of clean water and proper sanitation facilities led to a rise in waterborne diseases, adding another layer of suffering to an already beleaguered population. The humanitarian crisis was not just a result of material shortages. It was exacerbated by the restrictions on human movement. The blockade made it exceedingly difficult for people to leave Gaza for medical treatment, educational opportunities, or even to reunite with families. This restriction on movement had a psychological impact, contributing to a sense of entrapment and hopelessness among Gazans. The young population, in particular, faced a future that seemed devoid of opportunity, a reality that had implications for the social and political stability of the region. The crisis drew the attention of international humanitarian organizations, which faced significant obstacles in delivering aid. The blockade and ongoing hostilities made it challenging to get supplies into Gaza, and even when aid did arrive, the fractured political landscape complicated its distribution. Despite these challenges, international aid organizations continued to operate, providing essential services and drawing attention to the humanitarian situation. However, aid alone was insufficient to address the systemic issues at the heart of the crisis. The humanitarian situation in Gaza became a focal point in the international discourse surrounding the Israel-Hamas conflict. It raised ethical questions about the impact of the blockade on civilian populations and led to debates within the international community about the legality and morality of Israel's actions. While Israel argued that the blockade was a necessary security measure, this stance was increasingly at odds with international opinion, which viewed the humanitarian impact as unacceptable and called for immediate remedial action. As we delve further into the intricacies of the Israel-Hamas conflict, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza stands as a stark reminder of the human cost of this protracted struggle. It's a crisis that transcends political and ideological lines, affecting individuals who have little say in the policies that shape their lives. Understanding the depth and breadth of this humanitarian disaster is essential for any meaningful discussion of the conflict, as it highlights the urgent need for a resolution that addresses not just the political issues, but also the immediate and long-term well-being of the people caught in the crossfire. Tunnels and smuggling, a lifeline. In the face of the blockade and the resulting economic and humanitarian crisis, an intricate network of tunnels became a lifeline for the people of Gaza. These subterranean passageways, primarily along the Gaza-Egypt border, served as conduits for a wide range of goods, from basic necessities like food and medicine to construction materials and, controversially, weapons. The tunnels became an essential part of Gaza's economy, providing a means of survival in an environment where formal avenues of trade and supply were severely restricted. However, the tunnel economy was not without its drawbacks. For one, it was a dangerous enterprise. The tunnels were prone to collapses and accidents, and those who worked in them faced significant risks. Additionally, the smuggling operations were largely controlled by various factions and criminal groups, leading to a rise in lawlessness and corruption. This underground economy also provided revenue for Hamas, which levied taxes on the goods coming through the tunnels, thereby indirectly benefiting from a situation that it had a role in perpetuating. The tunnels also had significant security implications. Israel argued that the tunnels were used to smuggle weapons and militants into Gaza, thereby posing a direct threat to its security. This claim was not without merit, as various reports indicated that arms and even trained fighters did make their way into Gaza via these tunnels. This aspect of the tunnel economy further complicated international efforts to address the humanitarian crisis. As calls to lift the blockade had to be balanced against legitimate security concerns. Internationally, the existence of the tunnels was often cited as evidence of the failure of the blockade to achieve its stated objectives. While it may have restricted formal economic activity, the blockade gave rise to an alternative, illicit economy that not only undermined Israel's security, but also perpetuated a cycle of dependency and poverty among Gazans. As we continue to explore the complexities of the Israel-Hamas conflict, the role of tunnels and smuggling operations serves as a testament to the resilience and ingenuity of the people of Gaza, but also as a symbol of the dysfunction and danger that characterize the region. These tunnels are more than just passageways for goods. They are a manifestation of the desperation and complexity of a conflict that defies easy solutions. Understanding their role provides a nuanced view of how people adapt to untenable situations, but also how such adaptations can create new sets of problems that further entrench an already intractable conflict. Chapter 8. Operation Pillar of Defense, T, The next significant military confrontation between Israel and Hamas came in November 2012 with an operation that Israel dubbed Pillar of Defense. The operation was initiated with the targeted killing of Ahmed Jabari, the head of the military wing of Hamas and a key figure in the organization. The assassination was a calculated move by Israel, aimed at eliminating a man seen as the architect of numerous attacks against Israeli civilians and soldiers. For Hamas and many Palestinians, however, Jabari was a resistance hero, and his killing was met with outrage, setting off a chain of events that would escalate into another round of intense fighting. The assassination of Ahmed Jabari was a significant moment in the Israel-Hamas conflict for several reasons. First, it signaled a return to targeted killings as a tactic, a strategy that Israel had largely refrained from in the years following Operation Cast Lead. The killing was intended to send a message to Hamas's leadership, demonstrating Israel's willingness to take decisive action against individuals deemed a threat to its security. Second, the assassination had immediate repercussions on the ground. Rocket attacks from Gaza into Israel intensified, leading to Israeli airstrikes and eventually a broader military operation. The cycle of violence was set in motion once again, with both sides engaging in hostilities that would result in civilian casualties and international condemnation. Third, the killing of Jabari complicated diplomatic efforts to de-escalate the conflict. Egypt, which had played a mediating role in previous confrontations, found it challenging to broker a ceasefire in the wake of the assassination. The act also drew criticism from other international players, further isolating Israel diplomatically and adding another layer of complexity to an already fraught situation. As we delve deeper into the Israel-Hamas conflict, the assassination of Ahmed Jabari serves as a pivotal event that both reflected and influenced the strategies, attitudes, and dynamics of this ongoing struggle. It was an act that had far-reaching implications, affecting not just the military calculus, but also the political and diplomatic landscape. Understanding the significance of this targeted killing provides insights into the high-stakes game of escalation and retaliation that characterizes this conflict, offering a lens through which to view the challenges and dilemmas that both sides face in their quest for security and justice. 8 days of airstrikes. Following the assassination of Ahmed Jabari, Israel launched a series of airstrikes on targets in the Gaza Strip, marking the beginning of an 8-day military operation. The airstrikes were aimed at degrading Hamas's rocket launching capabilities and targeting its leadership, but they also had a broader objective: to send a message of deterrence, signaling Israel's willingness to take robust military action in response to attacks on its territory. The 8 days of airstrikes had a devastating impact on Gaza, while Israel stated that it took measures to minimize civilian casualties. The reality of warfare in a densely populated area meant that civilians were inevitably affected. Buildings were destroyed, families were displaced, and the already strained healthcare system struggled to cope with the influx of wounded. The airstrikes also disrupted daily life in Gaza, closing schools and limiting the movement of people and goods, exacerbating the existing humanitarian crisis. On the Israeli side, the operation was met with a mixed response. While there was broad public support for taking action against rocket attacks, questions were raised about the effectiveness and ethics of the airstrikes. The operation did succeed in reducing rocket fire temporarily, but it also drew international criticism and did little to address the root causes of the conflict. Moreover, the airstrikes led to a rallying effect among Palestinians, solidifying support for Hamas and further entrenching divisions between the two sides. Internationally, the 8 days of airstrikes led to diplomatic efforts to broker a ceasefire. Egypt, along with other international actors, played a key role in these negotiations, which eventually led to a cessation of hostilities. However, the ceasefire was fragile and did not address the underlying issues that led to the conflict in the first place, leaving both sides in a state of uneasy calm that could be shattered by any new provocations. As we continue to examine the complexities of the Israel-Hamas conflict, the 8 days of airstrikes during Operation Pillar of Defense serve as a microcosm of the broader struggle. They highlight the challenges of military action in a densely populated area, the ethical dilemmas that arise from such action, and the limitations of using force to achieve long-term peace. The operation also underscores the role of international diplomacy in managing the conflict, even if such efforts often amount to short-term fixes rather than long-term solutions. Understanding this episode provides a window into the cyclical nature of the conflict, where periods of intense violence are followed by temporary ceasefires, only for hostilities to erupt anew, perpetuating a cycle that seems to have no end in sight. Ceasefire and diplomatic efforts. After 8 days of intense airstrikes and rocket attacks, a ceasefire was brokered, largely through the diplomatic efforts of Egypt, with support from the United States and other international actors. The ceasefire was more than just a pause in hostilities. It was a complex diplomatic achievement that required delicate negotiations and concessions from both sides. For Israel, agreeing to a ceasefire meant weighing the benefits of halting rocket attacks against the political costs of appearing to let Hamas off the hook. For Hamas, the ceasefire offered a respite from airstrikes but also raised questions about its ability to deliver on promises of resistance against Israel. The ceasefire was fragile, maintained more by a mutual desire to avoid further escalation than by any resolution of underlying issues. Both sides claimed victory. Israel pointed to the degradation of Hamas's military capabilities, while Hamas claimed that its survival and ability to fire rockets until the last days of the conflict were signs of resilience and resistance. However, these claims did little to address the root causes of the conflict, such as the ongoing blockade, settlement activity, and lack of progress toward a two-state solution. Internationally, the ceasefire led to a period of increased diplomatic activity aimed at finding a more lasting resolution to the conflict. Various proposals were put forth, including easing the blockade and restarting peace talks. However, these efforts faced significant obstacles, not least of which were the deep-seated mistrust between the two sides and the fractured political landscape within both Israel and the Palestinian territories. The international community found itself in the unenviable position of trying to negotiate peace between parties that were not fully committed to the compromises such a peace would entail. As we further explore the Israel-Hamas conflict, the ceasefire and subsequent diplomatic efforts during Operation Pillar of Defense offer valuable insights into the challenges and limitations of peacemaking in this fraught context. The ceasefire was not an end, but a temporary cessation of hostilities, a brief interlude in a long, running drama that seems to defy resolution. It serves as a reminder that while diplomatic efforts are essential, they are also extraordinarily complex, requiring not just international mediation, but also a willingness from both sides to make difficult concessions. Understanding the dynamics of this ceasefire provides a lens through which to view the intricate interplay of military action, diplomacy, and domestic politics that shapes this enduring conflict. Chapter 9. Operation Protective Edge. In the summer of 2014, the Israel-Hamas conflict escalated into another major military confrontation, known as Operation Protective Edge. The immediate spark for this operation was the kidnapping and subsequent murder of 3 Israeli teenagers in the West Bank. The incident ignited a firestorm of public emotion in Israel and led to a massive manhunt in the Palestinian territories. While Hamas initially denied involvement, it later praised the kidnappings, further inflaming tensions. Israel's response was swift and severe, including the arrest of hundreds of Palestinians affiliated with Hamas, further escalating hostilities. The kidnapping and its aftermath served as a catalyst for a conflict that had been simmering beneath the surface. It brought to the fore the deep-seated animosities and grievances that characterize the Israel-Hamas relationship. For many Israelis, the kidnapping was a stark reminder of the security threats they face and reinforced the perception that Hamas is a terrorist organization that cannot be trusted. For Palestinians, particularly those in Gaza, the subsequent crackdown by Israel was seen as a form of collective punishment, exacerbating already high levels of frustration and anger. The incident also had broader geopolitical implications. It strained relations between Israel and the Palestinian Authority, as the latter was criticized for its cooperation with Israel in the search for the kidnapped teenagers. Moreover, it led to a breakdown in the already fragile unity government that had been formed between Fatah and Hamas just a few months earlier, further complicating the Palestinian political landscape. As we delve deeper into the complexities of the Israel-Hamas conflict, the kidnapping that sparked Operation Protective Edge serves as a grim illustration of how individual events can escalate into widespread conflict. It shows how deeply emotional and politically charged incidents can quickly spiral out of control, triggering military and diplomatic responses that have far-reaching consequences. Understanding the dynamics set in motion by this kidnapping provides a crucial context for examining the subsequent military operation, which would become one of the longest and most devastating conflicts in the history of the Israel-Hamas struggle. The ground invasion. After an initial phase of airstrikes aimed at degrading Hamas's rocket-launching capabilities and targeting its leadership, Israel launched a ground invasion of the Gaza Strip. The ground invasion was a significant escalation, involving thousands of Israeli troops, tanks, and artillery. The stated objectives were to destroy the network of tunnels that Hamas used for smuggling and launching attacks, and to further degrade the group's military capabilities. The ground invasion had a profound impact on both sides of the conflict. In Gaza, the incursion led to a sharp increase in civilian casualties and widespread destruction. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to rubble, and critical infrastructure, including hospitals and schools, was damaged or destroyed. The humanitarian crisis escalated dramatically, with hundreds of thousands of people displaced from their homes, seeking refuge in already overcrowded UN facilities or with relatives and friends. For Israel, the ground invasion was a complex and risky operation that also resulted in casualties. Israeli soldiers faced intense combat situations, including ambushes and attacks from the tunnel network they were tasked with destroying. While the operation succeeded in destroying many tunnels and military targets, it also exposed vulnerabilities in Israel's military preparedness and raised questions about the overall effectiveness of the ground invasion in achieving its long-term objectives. Internationally, the ground invasion was met with widespread condemnation. Accusations of disproportionate force and violations of international law were levied against Israel, leading to calls for immediate ceasefires and investigations into potential war crimes. Diplomatic relations between Israel and several countries were strained, and the conflict became a focal point for international debate on the Israeli-Palestinian issue. As we continue to explore the intricacies of the Israel-Hamas conflict, the ground invasion during Operation Protective Edge stands as a significant chapter that reveals the complexities and costs of military engagement in this protracted struggle. It serves as a case study in the limitations of military force to achieve lasting solutions, and raises ethical and legal questions that continue to be the subject of intense scrutiny and debate.